Statement 13 of chapter 3. The prohibitions are always prohibited, and the permissions are always permitted. So here, the translation uses prohibition and permitted. For the English for this, I prefer, I'm sure you know, prescription, and proscription. Prescription and proscription. So the vocabulary of prescription and proscription is taken from, at least in English, generally it's vocabulary used in the context of the relationship between the doctor and the patient. I mean, not restricted to, but often in the relationship between a doctor and her patients, this language, this expression of the doctor has prescribed that you take this medicine, has prescribed that you change your eating habits, has prescribed that you exercise more, has prescribed, right? And that the doctor, she has also proscribed, although this word is not used so much, but it's the opposite of prescribe, is proscribe. Proscribe is when the doctor says, and then, you should not, after eating, immediately go take a nap. Don't do that. And doctors say, and you should not, have so much sugar in your diet. So prescribe and proscribe. And generally, to prohibit and to permit, right? That, for sure, is not in the doctor and patient context. That is almost more in the context of government, laws. You are permitted to do this, this, this. You are prohibited from doing this, this, this. And then, parents, using skillful means, also have to talk to children like that. You are permitted this, you are prohibited from that. But here it's important for us to understand that when the Buddha says, do this, don't do that, it's more like a doctor. So when we say that it's more like a doctor and that we should relate to these do's and don'ts as the prescription and the proscription of a doctor, why we put it in that way is to remind us that, and this is like the first line of the first chapter of Gongchik, it says, what Buddhas teach are simply the way things are, the natural principle that underlies, right, all phenomena. And how that principle plays out in relative reality. How that principle plays out even in terms of leading to the path of Buddhahood. It plays out according to the principle of karmic causality. So this is not something that Buddhas created. And therefore, this is also not something that, Buddhas can simply say, oh, for you, you are so good. You have been so good. So I give you temporary permission to do the things that Otherwise, I tell these people, no, you cannot. And I've heard that there is some tradition, for example, in Judaism, that says that I don't know how widely held this idea is, but apparently there is one opinion that all the things that God prohibited Jews from eating, especially we know like pork, that this is just a temporary prohibition. That when the Savior Messiah comes and there is justice and peace and goodness established in the world forever, then pork, and all the things prohibited becomes permitted. It's just a temporary prohibition. Yeah. So there are ideas like that, or that, God ordered you to kill. Generally, God says don't kill. But then, on special occasions, God says, go ahead. You have my permission. Right? And we have examples like that, that other traditions will accept. Then even among Buddhists, although you might think in those other traditions, it sounds strange, why God says don't kill, and then sometimes God says, but, in this case, it's okay, right? So we might think, that's really strange, But there is a version, I think, a similar, even within Buddhist thinking sometimes, which is, maybe not the same degree of seriousness, but nonetheless, so it's then pertaining to what we've been looking at so far. This idea that, Buddha says to those who are monks and nuns, you not allowed all these things. You lay people? Yes, go ahead. You're allowed all these things that they are not allowed. So then, now, the mainstream majority Buddhist position will say, but you see, what the Buddha said to the monks and nuns, not allowed, they can be divided into natural precepts and established precepts. Established here have the same meaning of like permitted or prohibited. Some are prohibited because by nature they are negative. Some are prohibited not by nature, but given the circumstance, they are prohibited. And the circumstance here would be, you say you want to become monk and nun, so you are prohibited now. You did not say you want to become monks and nuns. You are permitted. You have become monks and nuns? You are prohibited from fancy clothing. You have not become monks and nuns. You can wear fancy clothing. Just on the level of like buying the fancy clothing, You think because you have not taken monks and nuns vows, your fancy clothing will cost less? No, it costs exactly the same. If a monk and nun want to buy the fancy clothing. It's applicable, both, Except that here, they have taken the training formally. And here, we have not. And so here it says, therefore, that which is prescribed will always be prescribed. And that which is proscribed will always be proscribed. Always, not just in the sense of time, always. Or 1,000 years ago, it was prescribed. 1,000 years later, it will still be prescribed. At all times means for all people at all times. It also has that meaning, in all situations. But of course, when we have to make choices, they're not that simple. I get that, and I think we have to also admit that. Yeah, when we have to make actual choices, in life situations, it's not so straightforward. Of course. So there are numerous examples of like past life of the Buddha in the Jataka tales, where he is confronted in a situation where he has to do things that are going to lead to the experience of suffering for himself. And in those stories, you see that he makes that decision. He says, "No, I will do it." But his motivation is different from ordinary motivation. Yeah, his motivation is to protect and to benefit others. So the most famous story, right, is the story of Captain Compassion. But there's more than that story. There are many stories, many accounts of Buddha's past lives where he had to make difficult decisions. So here, Kyobpa Rinpoche's interpretation of that story of Captain Compassion, right? The captain that had to, that found himself in a situation where there's no choice, he will have to kill this person who is planning to kill everyone on this cruise, on this ship. And that if he doesn't kill this person is going to kill all 500 passengers. And then all these 500 passengers, it turns out that they are great bodhisattvas. So the captain saw that situation and thought, oh my God, it'll be terrible for this world, if 500 bodhisattvas are killed. Because they can bring so much benefit to the world. So I cannot let this person kill these 500 bodhisattvas. And also, he also thought, he's saying, oh my gosh, if this person, actually ends up killing 500 bodhisattvas, what kind of, horrible suffering will come to this person? And then he said, I have no choice. I have to kill this person. Now, of course, you and I both can say, hey, why does he have to kill? Maybe he should just tie this person up. Lock this person up in a room, until you arrive, right? Like someone in the plane, about to kill, lock them in the toilet, Don't let them out, right? Yes, but the story doesn't go like that, okay? So the story says, he had no other choice, he had to kill, So Kyobpa Rinpoche, if you understand Kyobpa Rinpoche's emphasis, we don't have any records of, I think, at least I've not seen, of Kyobpa Rinpoche directly addressing this story. But if we were to use his viewpoint to address this story, he's going to say, yes, of course, Buddha Shakyamuni in his past lifetime, while still on the path to Buddhahood, he made that decision. But that decision that he made definitely brought personal negative consequences to himself, because in order to kill another human being under those circumstances, a certain amount of hatred, even though for you and me maybe that hatred is very subtle, but nonetheless certain amount of hatred needs to be involved for him to kill the would-be murderer, mass murderer. And for that amount of anger that then, led to the completion of the act of killing another human being, he have to experience the ripening of that negative karma. Even though he purified a lot of it, but he wasn't, he did not completely purify. So in the short term, it is said, that after that lifetime, he was born in the hell realms. But because his bodhicitta was so strong and so powerful, right? Even though he was reborn in the hell realms, even though he experienced those suffering, he experienced the suffering in a meaningful way, and he did not give up bodhicitta. Instead, it increased his bodhicitta. So it's not clear-cut, It's not saying, oh, absolutely this you should do, absolutely that you should not do. This is not the point here. I think sometimes we misinterpret this point and think, absolutely you should not do, absolutely you should do. It's not absolutely you should or should not do. It's when you do, please be prepared for the natural workings of cause and effect, and don't expect God, don't expect Buddha, don't expect someone to have the ability to turn the principle of causal, karmic causality upside down. Right? So to me, this understanding makes, this even more powerful. Makes the choice of making the appropriate choices more complex and more powerful. If someone came to me and said, Hun, do these negative things, and I guarantee you that if you do these negative things, but for this good reason, if you do it, then I can guarantee you there is no negative consequences for you. Instead, not only that, but you can do so much good. Then it's easy, no brainer, right? Then big deal. I have been given a get out of jail free pass, So what's so fancy? What's so impressive about, making that decision? But when you know, your personal freedom, your personal situation might get negatively impacted, but your care and concern for others has become so overwhelming that you say, I am willing to suffer setback myself. But not the kind of setback that will make you give up bodhicitta, So be careful about that too. So you see, it's not an absolute this or absolute that. You really need to weigh. You really need to have more awareness of your own situation. So in other words then, I remember Khenpo Rinpoche used to say, he says, one of the most important qualities of a bodhisattva is great courage. Great courage. Without developing. So great courage don't fall from the sky. Right? Great courage and all these qualities that we talk about, they don't fall from the sky. We have to develop them. And so he says, we really need to develop great courage. Because it was great courage, or at least one of the mental qualities, heart qualities that Captain Compassion had. It's not just compassion, but also great courage. Compassion pushed him to do what he did. Great courage in the face of understanding the consequences of this action, the karmic causality that will come out of this. I will be experiencing a lot of personal suffering, or potentially at the very least. I see this clearly, but I can do it. So that's why the image of compassion is so often associated with our parents, and specifically in this culture, in Tibetan culture, our mothers. Because so many of our mothers and our fathers, our parents, although maybe you say, oh, but not mine. Sometimes when you say you're not mine, we're not seeing clearly enough, We watch TV and we see other people's parents. Oh, they're so kind, but mine is not kind enough. Oh, they're self-sacrificing, but mine, they're not very self-sacrificing. That sometimes has to do with our perception, Anyway, so often the example of compassion and love, Buddha says, it's like our mother, it's like our parents. Because really, more than anybody else in this world, if you count all the frequency, right? Really, parents will do things that they know even when it will bring them personally suffering, they will do it for their kids. Not everybody feels like that, Not every parent feels like that. If you don't feel like that, it doesn't make you a bad person. But the emphasis of, how parents will do. And the point is not just parents, so how all of us, can develop this overwhelming sense of being ready to suffer for others. So that's one element in the Bodhisattva path. The other element is, and then, if you're just blindly willing to suffer for others, that's also not very good. Yeah, just blindly, I will suffer for others. If I can help them, let me suffer, Then you become addicted to suffering, Some of us are like that, Like when we listen to a tragic story, on radio, on TV, we want to go mother these people, It's very weird, I was just listening to this BBC every morning. I listened to it, and they were featuring this one Australian, I think, young man that was involved in a terrible accident. All his friends either died or have brain injury, but he came out okay, and then all the guilt that he had to carry. But he talked about how he said, suddenly everybody want to be close to me, want to be my best friend, want to claim a closeness to me. Because I think in the way we are all wired, we're in sort of attracted to suffering in that way. But that need to be careful, to be skillful about that. Is this compassion or is this some kind of neurosis, that we're attracted to people suffering and then, let me, So need to have wisdom, need to cultivate wisdom, need to cultivate courage, need to cultivate compassion. Need to have all those things in better and better balance. But there's no set formula. So the thing is, you have to put yourself in the situation and see. Sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed. Pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Don't let me fail so badly that I will give up this path. That we can pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to help us. Also pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Don't let me be so self-centered and afraid to test, to put myself in a situation to do something difficult. Because that is then also the other problem, sometimes Buddhists, especially Buddhists following this understanding. Oh, it's just training the mind, just training the mind, just training the mind. Oh, I have no time for you. You hungry? Well, that's your karma. I'm training my mind. I'm training my mind. Also pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may I dare to be willing to get into that situation and potentially get messy. But may I make the right decisions. So 13, right? The proscriptions are always proscribed and the prescriptions are always prescribed. Buddha don't change in terms of that. And so Khenpo Kunpal's commentary on page 146. For this reason, all proscriptions are always proscribed. And if an action becomes a non-virtue for someone, it is not prescribed. All prescriptions are always prescribed. And if an action becomes a virtue for someone, it is not proscribed. In a footnote, this is a good, important footnote. Jigten Sumgon's direct disciple and early commentator, Dorje Lopön wrote, "It is said in Jigten Sumgon's instructions to the minister Jobir, an afflicted mind and a non-virtuous action that temporarily and ultimately lead to a result of harm for oneself and others, they are never permitted. But a prohibition that is, it is a prohibition that is always prohibited. A mind without afflictions and a virtuous action that temporarily and ultimately lead to the result of benefit and happiness for oneself and others are never prohibited. But they are permission that is always permitted." Now, coming back to Khenpo Kunpal, he says, to give an example, touching women out of desire is an excess for monks and thus prohibited. However, for the sake of saving a woman's life, if she is carried away by water or the like, the Buddha permitted touching or holding her with the perception of touching a stone or a lump of earth. In other words, no sexual desire arises. Like this example, and so forth, it is never permitted to touch a woman out of desire, and it is never prohibited to touch stones and lumps of earth. Yeah. You understand what he's saying? But he is avoiding the more controversial part of Jigten Sumgon's statement. He's still trying to kind of limit it to, it's just monks, that are not allowed to touch women. It's kind of the mainstream position. Oh, this only pertains to monk. If you are not a monk, he also doesn't explicitly say that, but you can see in his commentary, right? He doesn't touch that. topic. So then applying this principle, then you can say, well, in the monk's vows, maybe, I did not check exactly, but in the monk's vows, it doesn't say monks are not allowed to touch men, right? But then if you follow this understanding, this principle, but if there is a monk who has desire for male bodies, and they go and touch a man, well, there is negative karma. And remember, negative karma is not punishment, It's not saying you've broken a law, you are a bad person. I think this is so hard for us to misunderstand. Because we still think of negative karma and positive karma as God's rewards and punishment. Even when we have stopped believing in God, we still have this baggage. And then with this baggage comes the judgment that is usually behind this idea of rewards and punishment. So then when you say someone is suffering and you say, oh, this is their negative karma, I think people, even people who are now following Buddhist way, there's still that baggage. And then you secretly, you're thinking, we're saying this is a bad person. No, we're not saying this is a bad person at all. This is not about this person is good or this person is bad. It's talking about the mechanics of happiness and the mechanics of suffering. Yeah, if we do things out of the three poisons and will increase the three poisons, then that is negative karma. Those are negative causes. Why negative? Not because, oh, now you're impure. Oh, now you're not pure like an angel. No, not because of that. Not because God don't want you to have that fun. But simply, if we feed desire, we increase desire. So it's negative karma to drink seawater. Does it make you a bad person to drink seawater? But when you drink seawater, what happens? You become more thirsty. Then you become thirsty. Then you think, oh, let me drink more seawater. You become more thirsty. You become more thirsty. You become more thirsty. But then sometimes you say, but if I take one mouth of seawater, it will temporarily relieve my desire to quench thirst. Maybe, hard to say. That's what I mean by it's not always so clear. It's not always so straightforward. Maybe you say, I need to drink one mouthful right now because if I don't, like maybe I will drop dead. But then I drink one mouthful, of course, it'll lead to more thirst, right? But then somehow in between this drinking and more thirst, fresh water arrives, It starts raining, Oh, rain. So the consequences of actions that we have created, right? Karma, negative karma. Actually, karma is just, to be very technical about this, karma is cause. Vipaka is result. But we shorten it and just call it karma. Actually, it should be karma vipaka, cause and effect. The law, right? The principle of cause and effect. Karma vipaka. So the the consequences or the results of karma can be mitigated even after it has been created. Just like when you have created good karma, if you are not careful, you can destroy that good karma. So it doesn't ripen into good results because you destroy it. So they say one of the ways in which good karma is destroyed is through the power of regret, the destructive power of regret. There is the positive power of regret, which is to regret having done something negative. There's also the destructive power of regret, which is to regret when we have done something good. They say regret can destroy that. Then elsewhere, like in Shantideva, he says, a moment of anger can destroy eons of good merit that has come from making offerings to the Buddhas, paying homage to the Buddhas. A moment of anger can destroy all of that. So very strong negative states of mind can destroy positive karma. Likewise, very virtuous states of mind can also destroy negative karma. So also don't think, we are also not saying, Kyobpa Rinpoche is also not saying that negative karma that has been created, there is absolutely no way to mitigate them. There is. In fact, the Buddha, in the sutras say, don't say, because there were other spiritual teachers who taught that once karma has been created, that's it. The results will come. Nothing you can do about it. Buddha actually rejected that. He says, no. He says, don't say it. Don't. If you believe that, he says, then there is no point in making the decision to pursue what we call the spiritual life. He says the noble life becomes meaningless if we say that negativity that has been created in the past cannot be mitigated, cannot be lessened. The results of those actions cannot be lessened. He said if that was the case, then there's no point to living a noble life. So the analogy he gave, the one that I really like, he says, he asked his student who made that statement. He said, he said, let me ask you this. He said, this scoop of salt here, if I put it, into this cup, a big heap of salt, is this water easy to drink or not? His disciples say, oh, it'll be very hard to drink this water, this scoop of salt into this. Buddha says, so this scoop of salt is any negative karma. This small cup is an untrained mind, an untrained heart. So when this negative action has been created and dropped into this untrained, limited mind, you drink, oh, terrible, very salty. The Buddha says, same scoop of salt, and now put into a big pool, like a swimming pool, right? He says, and when you drink the water, how does it taste? And the students say, oh, barely can taste the salt. And Buddha says, that pool is a trained mind. It's a trained mind. It'll be less painful, less oppressive. So we can always train our minds. That is how courage comes. The courage that we were talking about earlier. Courage is one way of thinking about what this trained mind is. So today we stop here.